Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 4 of the anime series Dance with Devils. This episode, oh, why'd they have to go there? I enjoyed this episode for the most part. All the twists and turns, the, depth of the characters and the background, elements of the story, questions, being answered for all intents and purposes, with new questions arising in the aftermath of them and everything like that. With the exception of the one overarching song for this episode pertaining to Lindo, Ritsuka's brother, and per its lyrics, we're basically effectively seeing that not only are we dealing with, a forbidden grimoire, we're also dealing with a sort of forbidden sense of love as well, in the fact that he's looking on his little air quotes sister with a little more than just familial love lights in his eyes. It's just like, do we have to do something like this again? Another anime has to skirt this line of uncomfortability and everything. It's just, with that as the one exception, the rest of the episode I thought was pretty awesome and quite captivating and intriguing, again, with the depth of the characterization from the get-go. Right out of the gate, we're beginning this episode with Ritsuka experiencing this nightmare and sort of holdovers of the mentality of Yuri, as we see toward the end of the previous episode, that she wasn't actually there to experience or witness, which begs the question, what's going on with that? In her nightmare, she's basically perceiving, as we saw toward the end of the episode, when she had parted ways with Yuri and Rem and been sort of, saved, if you will, by her brother, who just sort of found her out of nowhere. You effectively have her witnessing in her own nightmares this possessive nature Yuri was left with, of wanting to claim her as a prize over Rem, and his interests in her being sort of domineering, and one of wanting to, basically take command and control over her, whether he perceives her to have sort of, this grimoire-like power, per the speculation put forth in the comments, which I was really excited by, this idea that maybe the grimoire is not so much a book of, powerful spells and all these things. Maybe she herself, Ritsuka herself, is the grimoire, and she possesses some kind of power and ability. And this would seem to skirt that line of, speculation as far as, could she have perceived this aspect, crushing the butterfly and everything? She sees it in her mind's eye. Could there be some sort of psychic power that is an extension of something else already contained within her? Or was this just lingering sort of after effects of the hypnotic eye, Yuri used on her and everything like that? I find that quite captivating because, we do see effectively in this episode, we get a little more depth and history about what sort of was the impetus behind all of this, why her family and she in particular are now being gunned down, or gunned for, effectively by the vampires and the devils and everything like that. And that was another question I had in the early going. What were we dealing with here? Were we dealing with demons, vampires, lycanthropes, werewolves, that kind of thing? Who was vying against whom and everything like that? And we do find out that because of her grandfather's dealing in folklore and these dark arts, and I guess, I don't know whether he had stumbled across this grimoire or it was something that he penned and created, but in effect it sort of gained the malevolent attentions of these two factions vying for penultimate power. The devils, as our titular effectively, as well as the vampires we've seen time and time again, who may have been responsible for kidnapping Ritsuka's mother and everything, and possibly harming or killing her. We really don't know. And I find it interesting because we're also effectively told that it's all about the balance of power. The devils themselves were the penultimate power for, I guess, ages upon ages, and now, for whatever reason, their power is waning. I'm wondering if there's some sort of greater commentary aspect to the idea of the world and intellect evolving into more scientific rather than less superstitious belief sets and, religions and all these kinds of things. Or if it's something else entirely. Whatever, the end result is, these devils are losing their penultimate power, and the vampires are now vying to take control of it, as well as, lashing the world in its aftermath with this forbidden grimoire. And that's why they're both seeking it. It seems Rem may have as his motivations more a trying, self-preservation of his race. You could almost look upon it like that, especially because he has become somewhat a little more sympathetic in that he's almost heroic, and whereas there is still that question, is it all an act? Even Lindo raises this question to Ritsuka, and she's even, sort of uncertain about it in her own feelings on Rem and everything like that. She even goes so far as to sort of pointedly question him about it. We never see a resolution as to what he might have answered. I don't even think that was the real Rem at that point anyway. But all of that's quite, intriguing to me. The depth in this world, in this environment, it's still very much playing on that gothic horror aspect that drew me in. It's still got that sort of, rock opera, goth opera thing where you still have these songs. It's still very much like a play. And when we get to the first song of the episode, after we find how protective Lindo's being, I mean, he's gotten to the point where he's actually putting deadbolts and locks on chains, around the windows and everything like that, on the doors. He's kind of holding his sister Ritsuka prisoner, which is a little bit, nth degree insane, especially with the song he sings. But as that first begins, I was actually really excited that this seemed to be a duet between brother and sister, and it was going to kind of be like, here are these two people who represent the side of good, and they're both on the same side. They're going to be fighting and fending off the evils that are going to be surrounding them and everything. And it kind of starts that way. You hear like them both sing a couple of lyrics, but then all of a sudden you got the heavy metal beat coming in, and brother's effectively singing about lusting for his sister and all of that stuff and trying to contain it, and he doesn't want to, and whatever. Like, as I say, talk about just, off-putting. But there is an aspect of that I'm not willing to necessarily sell the farm on it entirely as yet, because there's a line of dialogue as we see that this Rem Ritsuka has run into, once again leaving both Lindo now and her friend Azuno, who is just like this. She is such a loyal friend. I feel so bad for her because, like, every time she tries to get into contact with Ritsuka, she's off going somewhere else, or doing something else, getting spirited away, potentially coming to harm, all this stuff. This friend's going to have an aneurysm from the high blood pressure that Ritsuka's causing her. But in effect, they're both left looking for Ritsuka because she's been spirited away once again by a sort of false Rem, as we find out. And why I found this absolutely fascinating was because one of the topics in the conversation in the comments on my previous episode discussion video between me and a couple other people was the blue-haired cat we see, cameoed very briefly, and you'll miss him in the previous episode. He seemed to be observing from afar what Yuri was doing. And the question was, what are his motivations? Who is he? Somebody had actually put forth an idea very closely relating to mine. I had actually mistaken it looking at the OP. When you see this blue-haired cat, he's sitting next to that little sort of corgi dog that we see, from time to time, who I believe to be Rem's dog, but I don't even know if that's the case. It's very interesting that you see them side by side in the OP, and I had actually mistaken it for Shiki, who has the purple hair, sort of sadomasochist guy, and I just thought it was like a lighter shade of the same color hair. But in fact, we are seeing that there is this other blue-haired guy. I guess he's also a devil or something along those lines. And you never actually see him and the dog in the same room twice, or at the same time, that kind of thing. So it does lead me to believe, as somebody put forth in the comments, similar to what I had in mind, maybe one of these devils, maybe one of these characters was transforming into the dog, a shapeshifter of sorts. And what was that all going to mean? What was the impetus behind his watching events? And we see that he's coming to the fore in this episode. We don't actually get a name, a confirmation whether he's Lowen, which is the name of the dog as per Rem's suggestion in a previous episode. I don't think they actually gave him a name, but we're seeing that he is the one behind sicking all of these sort of duplicate Rems on Ritsuka, causing her to be attacked effectively, and Lindo only just barely gets there, and he's actually attained, we see this sort of offshoot sequence where I guess he is now attained the penultimate exorcist powers he was seeking to protect her. He's been gifted this ring that I guess in a similar manner to her, the pendant she wears that was gifted to her by her mother, is meant to protect her. And we don't actually know how that's going to amount, what that's going to add up to, how this ring is going to affect anything. As we see, as they're cornered, the pendant shatters when she screams, and this also seems to suggest that she does have some kind of internal power. Now, why I say I'm not willing to sort of sell the farm on the unnatural feelings between brother and sister there, or at least on Lindo's side, is because when he is using this exorcism power on these Rem duplicates surrounding them, he says a line to the effect that he never expected to use this power on humans, or something along those lines. I forget verbatim what the line is, but I remember thinking when he said that, I was a little confused as to whether he meant he never expected to use those powers on these humans who were surrounding them and were possessed by evils, rather than being inhuman like the vampires or the devils, or if he was differentiating them as being human from himself, from what he is. Maybe he is inhuman. Maybe he's actually not blood relation. Maybe he's a stepbrother to Ritsuka, and he was raised from childhood to, command powers that are sort of unearthly and inhuman to help protect her and keep her safe as these factions might eventually come looking for her. I didn't quite know what that meant, what that amounted to, and I guess it'll remain to be seen. But just because it could mean that maybe he's not blood relation to her, maybe they've just grown up together, then it would be a little more saleable to me, the idea of him lusting for her as well. But of course, we do see that these are duplicates that have been, again, it's with the neck sort of tattoo or marking, where these are, people being mind controlled by the devils for all intents and purposes. And he manages, using this power, as we see, to stave them off, and they all disappear, and it all is surrounding this blue-haired guy. Now, when he goes back home, the legit Rem had showed up. And it was interesting how he just sort of leaves just as these, duplicates of him are evaporating and everything. And Lindo is just, strong belief, stay away from Rem. There's no redeeming him, whereas Ritsuka still is calling it into question. But as Rem has gone back to the third library, we see a confrontation between him and Blue Boy, He's like, where have you been? Very pointedly. And again, he walks into that room, he sort of fades away into the darkness, and we don't actually see, but there's a point earlier on where he kind of disappears, and there's the little dog again. So, he could be, in fact, transforming into it. He may be just observing. He may be like the right-hand man of, Rem himself. I'm not entirely sure. It seemed almost as though he was putting, Lindo to the test. And it's like, is he working of his own accord? Is he working in accordance with Rem? Is Rem out of the loop as to what he's doing? What are these different characters' motivations, in this whole process, in this whole effect? And we see in the preview for the next episode, I think, is Mage, the sort of tall Thor-looking guy, is going to be swooning after Ritsuka in that particular event and everything. And so to see where this is all going to go is going to be highly intriguing to me. I can't wait to find out. I do kind of hope we dial back on the whole brotherly love thing, if there's even any legitimacy to that. But yeah, everything else is still captivating me. I still like the vibe of it. I still like the songs and everything. And it's really the depth of the background of what's going on between the vampires and the devils with Ritsuka and her family, and to find that her grandfather was sort of mutated and, devolved, I guess, by the evil manifestations of this power he awakened, coinciding with these factions coming after him and gunning after his family. All of that stuff. I'm just wondering how it's all going to play out. That's primarily why I'm going to be still watching next week. And so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 4 of Dance with Devils, if you've seen it. If you enjoyed it still, in spite of, again, that whole aspect I don't even want to talk about again. And I hope there's more to it, and it's not just nasties and everything. If you're still captivated by the twists and turns of the characters and the story and the depth of everything going on like I am, if not, why not? Let me know in the comments below. I won't hold it against you if it's the one big thing that was bothersome to me and irksome to me in the episode. But yeah, love to hear from you. As always, have that conversation. And otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.